This is part 2 of our lecture on Renoir, and we are looking at a painting not done by Renoir. This is actually a painting done by a different artist, Alfred Sisley. Alfred Sisley would be the fourth member of our little group, along with Bazille, Renoir, Monet, and Sisley. The four of them would very famously go out and paint the outdoors together. Places like the place we're seeing here, the Fontainebleau Forest. Sisley is, again, one of the Impressionists. He showed with the Impressionists in several of their exhibitions, but he primarily just painted landscape paintings in kind of the Impressionistic style. When we look at this painting, this is actually very traditional in a sense. If you look in the bottom left corner, you can see two individuals painted very smallly in the landscape. This very much follows the traditional landscape type of feel that we have from the Salon. Here are two different works by Renoir, a portrait of Sisley and then a portrait of Sisley and his wife. As I mentioned, he is the fourth member of this little group of friends who all met in the Beaux Arts Academy. You can see Sisley looks like a rather large fellow. He also looks like a very kind fellow, jovial bear, if you will. And this is really another thing we do get from Renoir, as I mentioned in the previous lecture. When we see Renoir, he very much paints his friends, even if they are the anonymous people in kind of the background. So usually when we look at the paintings and the people within it, they have a very, very familiar, happy type of friendship type of feeling to them, and this leads forward to Renoir's paintings. When you look at the portrait of Alfred Sisley and his wife, you can see a combination of both realism and in the background the soft impressionism. Here's a painting again done around this time in the Fontainebleau Forest of a different artist. This is Jules Lecour, another friend of the group. We'll see him in a different painting here in a few minutes. But this is very typical of what you would find. This is the Fontainebleau Forest. We can already see some of the very famous plotchy type of light coming through the trees that we so famously know from Renoir. But this was a time when we had a lot of different artists working in the Fontainebleau area. There were these nice little towns all around. It was probably a very nice time to be an artist working out in this type of environment, meeting the other artists of the local area. And this was true of Renoir. Renoir very famously met Gustave Courbet, whose realism very much had an influence also on the work of Renoir, especially during this time period. This is very evident in the next painting we will look at, the very famous The Inn of Mother Anthony. This is a wonderful historic painting, and it's also just a wonderful painting. The woman cleaning the table would be the daughter of Mother Anthony, or Antony. The three figures that we have are, again, very, very close friends to Renoir. In the background, there is Alfred Sisley, and in the foreground, with his back turned towards us, that would be Monet, and the figure in between him, that would be Lecour. We will get back to him in just one moment. I love this painting. This is a great example of social realism, again, very much influenced by Gustave Courbet. This is Renoir's take on a Courbet, if you will. But once again, we see the friends of Renoir. Of particular interest to me is the background. If we look at the background, we see this wonderful little folky kind of sketches in combination with the realist painting. Now, going over again to Lecour, as the story goes, that summer Lecour and Renoir shared a house together, and Lecour had his mistress there, and his mistress had a little sister, and that little sister would soon become Renoir's lover for many, many years, about 6 years or so, Lise Triot, and we can see in a very, very early painting here from 1866, Lise sewing. She looks very young. That's because she is very, very young. But so is Renoir at this time. They have a very close relationship with each other, as I mentioned. They were lovers for roughly 6 years or so, and this is when we start to see another aspect of Renoir's painting, this type of monogamy that he kind of has with his models, which you'll actually see as Lise here over and over again from this period of time in many different guises throughout his work. This is a photograph we have of Lise during the time period, probably a little bit later. Again, this is this wonderful time in history when we do have photographs of the artist and many of the people around, and it's also reaching a point when it becomes affordable to have these portraits made. It's important to remember all of the different technologies that are taking place at this time and how much this is innovating the arts as well as society. We have everything from photography to innovations in painting, including small metal tubes and the ability for artists to go out and buy paint rather than having to make it by hand. We have gaslit streets in Paris for the first time in widespread area. A lot of the modern technology that we think of and we kind of take for granted is slowly working its way into Paris and the surrounding area right around this time. Here we have another image of Lise. I've seen actually several titles for this painting. This is Summer 1868. I've also seen it The Bohemian. I've also seen it The Gypsy Girl. I'm not sure where all the titles come from, but Summer 1868. And again, you can see she's still very young in this image. Maybe she's around 20 years old. They probably all had a wonderful summer together, the four of them, painting and doing things that young couples obviously do. Again, this is the woman that, if you're familiar with Renoir's work, the woman with the dark hair and the dark eyebrows, because as you can see, her eyebrows and hair are almost jet black. If you're familiar with this woman from his work, these are usually always Lise, at least to the certain time period in his life. And again, most of what we'll look at during this lecture will be this time period. Diana the Huntress, here we can see Lise in a very different guise altogether. This is work done obviously for the acceptance of the salon. Again, this is a mythological subject matter. Diana the Huntress would be a goddess from Greek mythology. Here we can see Lise with her bow unstrapped, with the dead animal in front of her. Again, a very large complexion of a woman, not quite the idealistic role that you usually see women in this type of role representing, but it's very obvious who this woman is. This is Lise one more time. You can tell absolutely by the face. This piece was not accepted to the salon jury. It was rejected despite the classical nature of the composition and the attempts to really kind of have the composition and theme work into what we think of as a salon accepted type of work, very much realistic. This actually was accepted to the salon in 1868. This is Lise with a small parasol. Again, this work was accepted. It wasn't a work that was overly dramatized within the salon itself, but it did hang within the walls of the salon. Again, this is something that separates Renoir from most of the other impressionists that we look at. Renoir actually does have some success in the salon area early on and later on in his career as well. If you think of all of the impressionists, it's probably safe to argue that of all of them, Renoir might have had a successful chance at a career outside of the Impressionist circle, just showing in traditional means like the salon. Again, if we look at this, though, we do see kind of the hints of Impressionism occurring as she's walking forward into the light. The top half of her body is cast in shadow within the trees. Here we see Lise again, much closer to the Diana the Huntress role rather than with the fully clothed parasol as we've seen. Again, this is thought to be more of a classical composition. It's actually rooted in a classical composition, which we'll look at here in just a second. But if we look at the extra aspects of the work, we can see the river itself. There's a very small dog actually laying on the sheets, or what would be her clothing, if you you will, leading up to her body. You can also see a small pair of shoes. Peeking behind is another person kind of doing a voyeur type of thing from the bushes, if you will. And we have Lise looking away innocently, almost not noticing that there is someone behind her, noticing the fact that she is completely naked. As I mentioned, this is based on a classical composition. If you know your Greek statuary, this would be absolutely based on the Aphrodite of Knidos. If you look at how Renoir has used the composition, he's essentially just reversed where she is standing, but we have the slight tilt of the head. We even have the contrapposto in the legs. We have the one hand covering the genitalia area, which is very, very famous. This is not the first time we've seen this, either in the Aphrodite of Knidos or in Renoir's painting. Very popular stance that we see repeated within this type of guise of showing this goddess figure unaware of the fact that she's being noticed, or in fact naked. One could say this would be the difference between the naked and the nude. But again, Renoir would know his classical work being of the Louvre. I'm not sure if he would have seen this particular statue in the Louvre, but it's very hard to imagine that he didn't see this statue at some time and use it as a direct model for this painting. Here we have her as an odalisque, an Algerian woman in 1870, again accepted to the Salon. This was a very fashionable painting during this time period, this Orientalism, if you will. You can see that she has foreign clothing on, but it is still the same woman. You can tell by her face, but also her hair. And as we look into the background, we can kind of see these things that one might imagine that an Algerian woman might have within her bedchamber, if you will. But the truth remains that, of course, Renoir has never been to Algeria, nor has he seen any interior from an Algerian apartment or anything of that nature. But we have a still life type of situation set up over on the left side of the composition to balance out her beautiful face. Also of note, we start to see the display of colors that will make Renoir so incredibly famous. This is Eugene Delacroix, and this is really where this whole idea of Orientalism really begins. We can see this in the women of Algiers in their apartment, this type of style of showing a foreign land to what would be Paris at the time, and the intrigue that would occur from this type of environment. Orientalism was very popular not only in showing areas from Algeria, but of course we have a huge amount of Japanese art being shown in Paris at this time, which you will of course see in many of the other pieces of artwork done by the Impressionists. But this is kind of the vogue of the time. This painting was done in 1834, but again, the style really is beginning with Delacroix, leading forward. But Renoir isn't the only painter to do this type of style, but Renoir certainly did more than one composition in this style, as we see from this other piece, which is actually the last time we will see Lise in any of his paintings. This is Parisian Women Dressed as Algerians in 1872. Again, accepted to the Salon. As I mentioned, many of his works were accepted to the Salon. This is a separation that we have from the other Impressionists. And as I did mention also, this is the last time we see Lise in any of his paintings. She very famously left him and went off and married an architect, and the two of them never spoke again. So this is the last time we will see her, and it's kind of a conclusion of a period of work, if you will, kind of the post or prior to Impressionist cycle work, where again he is mostly working with the Salon, trying to do the work that will fit in and get him recognition and establish himself within an art career, if you will, rather than just as a painter. This is something that he will continue to drive for most of his young life.